All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our session today. This session is the updated Embry-Riddle Worldwide Student and Faculty Survey results on generative AI in higher education. As a reminder, this is a 40-minute session and is scheduled to end at 3:55 p.m. Eastern Time. The presenter will take questions at around the halfway point and again at the end of her session. This app will close at the end of the session, and you'll be able to access the lobby and other sessions through the main website for our conference. And the next session after this will be another block of concurrent sessions for you to choose from, and that will begin at 4 p.m. So I'm now excited to introduce the presenter for our session, Dr. Alyssa DeNaro, Senior Generative AI Solutions Specialist. So Alyssa, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, and thank you all for joining me to hear about the Spring 2025 Student Perceptions of Generative AI Survey. Now, you might have seen this in your inbox just about a month ago, or even sooner. And what we're going over today is really recent survey data. We just got in, just finished compiling, and we're going to be comparing our student survey results to our faculty survey results, as well as to the previous year, the 2024 survey results, to see what we've done and how far we've come in the past year. Now, a little bit about our survey respondents. We had a great response rate. Now, what you're seeing on the screen here, that 315 survey respondents from the worldwide campus, that's up from 255 last year. That's just for worldwide. So the number for all three campuses was actually 553. So worldwide was a good representation of that survey, but we have more survey data to come. So what I'm going to go over with you today is just pertaining to our worldwide campus, which is the campus that I primarily serve as a part of the Division of Academic Innovation. But if you're not from the worldwide campus, or even if you are, you can think of this presentation as a teaser. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about, comparing the worldwide to the other campuses, but later at the AI Summit later this year, you're going to hear from me as well as representatives from the CTLEs at Prescott and Daytona to really dig into the survey data for all three campuses, comparing online and residential, looking at the differences between campuses, and also really talking to you in depth about our qualitative data that we collected as well. So this survey presentation, because this data is brand new, I'm just going to be talking about the quantitative data, which is all that I had time to parse through between the close of survey and this presentation. So later, we can offer you even more detail about what our students and faculty are thinking and how they're feeling about generative AI as we move into this next year. So a bit more about our student survey respondents. Most of the respondents reported that their major was in the College of Aviation, no surprise. And most of the students were actually in their first 2 years at Embry-Riddle who responded to our survey. Now, comparing that to our faculty population, we again got a great survey response rate, up from last year with 226 faculty from the worldwide campus responding to our survey. Again, that's just the worldwide slice. So we also in the future will be able to talk about the residential campuses as well. Now, digging into probably what you're most interested in, which is this piece of how often do our students report that they're using generative AI and how much has it changed since last year? So if you're one of those people that's been hearing all about how the students are outpacing the faculty, this number probably surprises you, as it surprised me. What I'm showing you here on this table is a comparison of how frequently students report using generative AI and for what purposes. So when I say generative AI, I mean ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, all of those generative AI applications that you've probably heard lots about. That encompasses all of those, and the students were made aware that that's what we were referring to as generative AI throughout this survey. So that first number, students who report using generative AI weekly, as in daily, frequently as in daily or weekly, that's 38% for our worldwide students. 42% for faculty. So faculty, interestingly here, just slightly outpacing student frequent use. Next, students who are using it on a monthly basis or less, that was 30% for students and 32% for faculty. And no use of AI, 18% for both. So a final number I want to call attention to in particular here is that use as an educator. 36% of our faculty report that they are using generative AI in some capacity as an educator. Now, for an interesting point of comparison, these are the numbers from the residential campuses, which you see across the board. Residential students and faculty are outpacing our online students and faculty at the use of generative AI. And the residential students are also outpacing residential faculty in their use of generative AI. So, different reasons for this. The context of our worldwide templated classes probably plays a role in terms of faculty use, and also the fact that our residential students are younger, more likely to be traditional student age, Gen Z, whereas our online students are a little bit older, may play a role in their use of this technology and how frequently they're using it. But as we move into this next year, and we're thinking about how to best serve our students and how frequently they're using this technology, this is some really interesting numbers to keep in mind, especially if you are on the worldwide campus and you are increasingly serving residential students who are more frequently taking our online courses. And when asked how their usage of generative AI had changed since last year, 35% of worldwide students said they were using generative AI more often than last year. 32% said they were using it in new ways, 34% and said they were thinking more critically about how and when they were using AI. So this increased reported use of AI also translates into more of an investment or more frequent investment in paid AI tools. So we have students reporting that they're using the tools more often, more frequently they have accounts, and more frequently are paying for accounts. You can see that number, 28% of students in 2025 on that table to the left-hand side report never having had any type of account with a generative AI tool such as Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT. That's down from 40% of worldwide students last year. So more students are exploring in different ways and getting into generative AI tools since the previous year is what our survey results point to. Now that 4% down at the bottom, this is the number of students who say they're currently using their ERAU Copilot subscription. That's that Copilot chat that is free to all students through our Microsoft account as a university. And the fact that this is not being really well utilized as of the time of our survey about a month ago probably points to a number of factors, one of which is likely that we're not doing a good enough job as an institution of letting students know that they have access to that resource. So next, I want to talk about the students' change in confidence between this year and last year. So if you remember our presentation last year's survey results, the 2024 survey, one of the things we really highlighted in that survey was that students were asking for more support, they wanted clearer expectations, and they were really feeling a lack of confidence in their understanding of generative AI, what it could do, and how it should be used in the classroom. And what we see on this chart on the left-hand side is a notable increase in confidence reported by our students across the board. Now, there's still obviously room to grow, but what we can see here is year-over-year improvement and enhanced understanding of AI tools. So pointing to that first number, 79% of our students report that they understand what generative AI is and what it can do, which I think is a really great point of information there. And around the same percentage, 81% report, this is the number at the bottom, that they understand generative AI's impact on plagiarism. And I also want to call attention to this number here, which I think has really skyrocketed since last year, and I think represents a positive change in our university culture. And this is that our students are saying now at 50% rather than 34% last year, that their education has prepared them to adapt to generative AI. And you heard from Dr. Austin earlier about the importance of our students preparing for a generative AI enhanced workforce and how important it is for us as faculty members and as support services to be sending these Embry-Riddle students out into the world fully equipped and prepared for what they're going to encounter. And another number that I really think reflects positively on our university is the fact that our students much more frequently report in 2025 knowing that they are confident in how to use generative AI in their discipline. So this shows that students are really feeling a lot better about the way that their education is preparing them to move forward in the workforce. And at this point, I'd actually like to open it up to any questions that you may have about these numbers so far before we go into kind of the nitty-gritty of some of the broader, narrower applications of how our students and faculty are using AI. And also, if you don't have any questions, I'm also interested in hearing from you about any comments you may have about your interpretation of these numbers and what they mean to you. All right, and as Sarah pointed out, feel free to ask questions via the chat or to raise your hand so Sarah can turn on your mic access. Okay, so a question from Herbert Hoffman. How much are these tools used and where should they not be? So great question. One of the things that we learned from this survey was actually that students are more frequently using AI tools within the context of their classroom in productive ways. That is, they're actually using these tools under the guidance of their instructor more often than they were last year. I think that's an area where we can still grow as a university, but it does show some improvement in that students are learning how to use these tools appropriately and in a classroom context and not going off on their own and potentially making poor choices. So we know that student use of these tools is increasing, but we don't know exactly how they're using these tools in every possible instance. But we will go into a little bit more of that data later. And from Sabrina, Sabrina says, interesting how high the number is regarding how education has prepared them to adapt to Gen AI. I know, I was really pleased with that as well. All right, so if you have any further questions or comments, I would love to hear them at the end of the session. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and move on to talk about some more of our survey results. So actually, the question before from Herbert Hoffman really ties into this next slide really well. And this is where students report learning about generative AI. And self-guided, self-directed learning is still the most popular. In 2025, this number is sitting at around 61%, say this is where they're learning about generative AI versus 59% in 2024. However, institutional instruction is becoming increasingly more important and prevalent. And this is up to 26% from 18% in 2024. And if you look at also the number below that, the number of students that say they're learning from social media is down. So I think this represents a really positive change, that our students are learning about generative AI from appropriate sources and with an ethical context, and the context of how these tools are used in their industry. It's really providing much better instruction and preparation for our students. And I think we can see that in some of those support numbers I pointed to earlier, and the amount of students who say that their education is better preparing them to adapt to the future of work. And one more point of comparison here, that last number on this slide, professional development. So this is actually referring to things like trainings provided by the workforce or professional organizations. And this is only a slight increase from 16% to 21%. So what we can see here is how well our institution is actually doing at increasing our offerings in comparison to others, other professional institutions that the students may encounter. And overall, our students are still asking for support regarding generative AI, but there is an overall decline in the desire for support. And I see this as a really positive thing. Likely, this is showing us that our efforts to educate students around this topic and the appropriate use of these tools, and that is the appropriate way to use them or not use them, depending on the context. This is providing an increased amount of clarity for support. So you can see here that that top desire for support is still students want to know how AI is used in their discipline, field, or industry. That is still the top desire. Students are really interested in the professional alignment as well as appropriate uses in the classroom. So that's that second number right there. Actually, this is at 51% this year, so that's not no longer the second most frequently requested area of support. But if you look at the second most frequently requested area of support, that's understand how AI supports learning. I think those really tie in together and I kind of point to the same needs regarding the classroom use of generative AI. And one of the reasons that I think, in addition to instructors talking about these topics more within the classroom and students reporting that they're learning more from their instructors also, in a massive increase, are reporting having a policy in their class, a generative AI policy that clarifies their expectations around how students can, should, or shouldn't be using generative AI in their course. And that overall just makes the experience for the students a lot clearer. It helps students to understand what is and isn't appropriate. And it increases the amount of transparency that students feel from their instructor, and it sets the stage for a context of transparency in the classroom in general, if it's clear to the students what is and isn't appropriate regarding generative AI use in that class. So in 2024, only 9% of our instructors at Worldwide reported having a policy, and in 2025, we're up to 66%. That's awesome. And of those who reported not having a policy, most of them actually said they fell into two camps. Either they have a policy, but they haven't yet had the chance to teach and implement their policy within the classroom, or they're waiting on their college department or university to develop a policy. And so I expect to see this number of instructors that have a policy in their class growing significantly in the future. And a little bit of context regarding the value of an AI policy and what we've been able to achieve as an institution. I'm going to provide for you some numbers from, actually, this is from a survey that was done very recently by the Walton Family Foundation and Gallup. This is a survey of Gen Z voices on artificial intelligence in the classroom. And what you're seeing in this graph here is there are three bars. The first is the report for students that are coming from schools that allow AI use in some circumstances. The second bar is schools that don't allow any AI use at all. And the third is schools where students are unsure about the policy. They don't know what is or isn't expected of them. And the question here is, when I graduate from high school, I will know how to use artificial intelligence in my daily life. And this applies to the workplace, obviously, as well as just personal life and school life. And you can see the vast difference that it makes when there is a policy, as well as when students are encouraged to use these tools in productive ways. So the students who are coming from schools that allow AI use in some circumstances were much more likely in this Gallup and Walton Family Foundation survey to report that they agreed or strongly agreed that they understood and felt confident in their ability to use artificial intelligence tools. And again, the only difference between these three bars of students is just where their schools stood on AI use and whether or not they had a policy in place. And putting this into further context, according to the World Economic Forum's 2024 Future of Jobs report, 45% of global employers consider artificial intelligence and big data capabilities to be core skills for their workforce. And as we have students coming out of their education here at Embry-Riddle, we also want to be one of those institutions that are preparing them for those jobs. 90% of American employers project AI skills will continue to grow in their importance by 2030. And that's both of those numbers are again coming from the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report. So moving back to our discussion of our survey results from our worldwide students, sorry, this is actually faculty. I want to point to these first two numbers at the top of my chart here. This is the question we asked faculty regarding the extent that they had integrated generative AI into their courses. Now, up from 2024 to 2025, discussions about generative AI at the beginning of the term have almost doubled, meaning that our faculty members are having clear conversations with our students, contributing again to those clarifying of expectations to help our students understand what is and isn't appropriate, what's expected of them regarding generative AI. And perhaps even more excitingly, we're almost up 3 times as high as the amount we were last year of faculty members who say they're discussing generative AI, not just at the beginning, but throughout the term, which I think is really something that as an institution, we should celebrate how far we've come in 1 year. That is extremely cool. Moving a little down the chart from there, 24% of our faculty are currently talking to students about how generative AI is used in their field, discipline, or industry. And 9% of those faculty actually have activities where students will learn those skills relevant to their field. The amount of faculty members who say they're using generative AI in class to model or practice skills in any capacity is up to 16%. And this last number here, providing generative AI training, is still pretty low at 9%. So I wanted to take this opportunity to let you all know that we do have an ERAU training that you could consider adding to your course if you're interested in incorporating some kind of generative AI training for your students. So I'm going to leave this QR code up on the screen for a second. This is a link to our Generative AI Foundations course that was developed as a collaboration between myself and the Division of Academic Innovation and the Hunt Library. And this course is designed to teach students the basics of what is and is not appropriate use of artificial intelligence at Embry-Riddle, how that applies to their classrooms, and gives really practical examples of what students can do that's appropriate within a classroom context, as well as what they should avoid. And this course also has a badge at the end to mark student completion. So if you wanted to incorporate this into an upcoming development, this can be added as an activity that students can complete and show you the badge to mark their completion, as well as an optional training that you can offer to any students who are interested. And I'm just going to pause for a moment because I saw something come up in the chat here. So John Hamilton asks, can we course developers expect support from our development team in identifying appropriate opportunities for the beneficial use of generative AI? Yes, you definitely can expect and ask for your IDD team that you're working with, if you're a part of Worldwide and you're developing a course, to help you think through opportunities for generative AI in your course development. You can also ask me. I'm available as well, and your IDD representative might even pull me in if there's a complex question or you really want to do a good brainstorming session. And next question, is this course free for students? Yes, Generative AI Foundations is completely free for all Worldwide, all Embry-Riddle, all 3 campuses, students and faculty. Everyone has access to this free course that was developed for our university. So moving back a little bit to those numbers about, we saw the number of faculty who had said they were incorporating discussions of generative AI and how it's being used in their industry. Now, when we ask students and faculty whether it's important to learn or to teach about how generative AI tools are used in their field, discipline, or industry, we saw really clear alignment on this. 82% of students said they agreed or strongly agreed that this was important, and 72% of faculty agreed or strongly agreed that this was important. Now, compare that again to some of those numbers we saw earlier. 40% of faculty say they have a good understanding of how generative AI technologies are being used in their field or discipline, and only 24% are talking with their students about how Gen AI technologies are being used in their field or discipline. And following that, only 9% have activities to help students learn those skills. So I think as we consider where we should go as a university into this next year and how we can continue this path of improvement, I think this is one of those areas where we have room to grow and room to make a big impact. Now, some numbers overall on student and faculty sentiment. What I want to point you to in this graph here is first, what we're looking at is the question of whether or not students believe that that generative AI will have a positive impact on their professional future. Now, if you look to that graph, I just pointed my arrow to the lighter yellow bar. That is the number from 2024, and the orange bar is 2025. So we can see the positive sentiment toward AI on their professional future is growing. And if we look to the right here, this is the number of students who say that AI will have a positive impact on higher education. So again, the light yellow bar, that's 2024. The darker orange bar, that's 2025. Students have a more positive view on how AI will impact higher education. And if we look next to that, we also asked faculty. The darker pink bar, that's faculty in 2024, and the lighter pink bar is faculty in 2025. So faculty also, to a lesser extent, have a more positive view of how AI will shape higher education this year than they did last year. We also asked whether students and faculty felt that AI would have a significant impact on their professional future and on higher ed. And whoops there. This first arrow is pointing to students reporting that they, okay, sorry, I did my arrows wrong. This first box is student responses, whether they felt that AI would have a significant impact on their professional future. And you can see that's actually down, which is really interesting. So students across the board feel that AI's impact will be more positive, but less significant. suggesting an overall more measured and nuanced view. And this is interestingly reflected in their opinions of the impact on higher ed as well. And to a lesser extent, we saw this with our faculty responses too. So since 2024, our students believe that AI will have a less significant effect on higher education than they did last year. So wrapping things up, I just want to point to a number of conclusions that I felt we could draw from just the quantitative data that we have from this very recent survey. And again, this is just a teaser. There's more to come in the future. And as we dig into the qualitative data that we also received in this survey, we'll be able to draw stronger conclusions and make a stronger case as to what our students and faculty are looking for. But the first of the preliminary conclusions that I was able to draw was that our students are feeling more confident, more capable in 2025 than they were in 2024. Now, there's still some need for support, especially around, as I said, more information about how generative AI is used in their industries and fields, as well as classroom support and helping students to understand what's appropriate, as well as how generative AI can support their learning. And as my colleague John Hamilton asked earlier and pointed to earlier, the Division of Academic Innovation, the Instructional Design Team, RCTLE, as well as myself and the AI support team, we're all here to help you in providing that support to students and thinking through what this could look like in your courses. Additionally, there's also greater access and interest for generative AI than last year. More students are using these programs and technology, and there's more investment in paid platforms. And as I mentioned earlier, students increasingly want generative AI tied to their career paths within the activities and the discussions that they're having in class around this technology. So at this point, I'd again like to open it up to questions as well as comments about what you think these numbers suggest and where you'd like to see our institution go within the next year. Well, if there are no questions, I am happy to wrap things up. But if you, as you continue thinking about these topics, and if you're in the middle of thinking through a course, redeveloping a course, or you just have questions that come up as you continue to think about generative AI and its impact on your classroom, please feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to ask any questions that you have about any resources that we've come up with, including the Generative AI Foundations course. Happy to help with anything that may come up for you guys after this session. And to that, I'm just going to go ahead and put my contact information in the chat for you.
Thank you, Alyssa, for sharing this information with us, and thank you to all the participants for attending. If you see the resources link at the bottom of your Zoom room, you should be able to access Alyssa's slides as well if you want to look at any of this information further. We hope to see you at one of our next sessions, which begins at 4 p.m. Eastern, so in about 10 minutes. So don't forget to head back to the lobby to access the next session. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.